Hi guys, welcome back to session on Python based data science lecture series. In today's session, I'm going to discuss about how we can use a widget called as check button. Now checkboxes in case of Python called as check buttons. Now in case of radio button, you can use either or. Both cannot be selected. But in case of checkboxes, if you have a more than one option selected or user want to select more than one option, then checkbox interface is used. To generate the checkbox in Python, we are using a widget called as check buttons. Let us understand if you want to select more languages to learn, like Python, like Java, like C++. So in this case, instead of having radio button, you can use a component called as check button. Let us go for more demonstrations of examples on it. Here is my first demo. Here I am asking user to select the gender. Obviously in this case you cannot select the both, but let us go for like using the same example for selecting a gender by using a check button over here. Here as I take a variable as a master for initializing the enter, and I define a method, define a function called as var states. Now these var states methods check the status of the check buttons. So whether the male checkbox is selected or your female checkbox is selected, that is going to display it over here. Here I am having a label, your gender, and then the variable I am using to check the status of that check button, that is var1, and it's an integer type of status, 0 or 1. Now check button, which you are going to put in the master, right, having a text mel, variable is var1, and then here we are using the grid of it. Then another variable called as var2, which is also integer type of variable, and it is checking the status of the another check button that is having text female, right? And then we have a button, right, by the name of quit and the show. Whenever you click on the quit button, it quits the frame, so that command will be process master.quit. And whenever you click on the button show, it will call a function called as var states, and this var states is actually going to check the status of checkboxes or check buttons rather, that is whether it's a true or false. True means like whether it is checked or unchecked. If it is checked, it is 1. If it is unchecked, it is 0. So here we have a label, we have a check button, and to check the status of that buttons, we have the variables called as var1 and var2. Now when you process the event on the checkboxes, right, a function called as var states get a call, and it will pop up the status of checkbox 1 is true or checkbox 2 is true, right? Let us check it out. Here is the executions. We have a window with the title your gender, and let's say it's a male or female. So if I select male and show, it will give the message male 1 and female 0. If you check female and show, it will say male 0 and female 1. Means in this manner you can go with the multiple checkboxes and check the status of it. Let us select both over there and process them. You'll get male 1, female 1. Now obviously in this example you can select either or, so it's a better example of radio button. But let's, for the considerations, let's say for the example reason, okay, so if you have a checkboxes, then right, you can select one, show. So male having check status 1 and female is 0. If you select female, both having 1 1. If you select female, only 1, male is 0 and female is 1. And if you unselect both and show, then there is a 0 0. Means in case of checkboxes, you can select all, you can deselect all, you can select multiples, right? And so you can select like you can select one or more or nothing. So that all possibilities are there with the checkboxes. If you press a quit, you can terminate the frame. Now let us go for the second example of the checkbox. Now firstly I'll give the like execution of it, demonstration of it. Here it is. Now here I'm having a list of programming languages I need to prefer, and the languages for speaking languages I need to prefer English and German. So list of the programming languages are Python, Ruby, Perl and C++. And in case of like languages to speak, that is English and German. So as I said, in case of checkboxes, you can select all, you can deselect all, you can select multiple as well. So let us construct this, how we construct this application. Here I build a class called a checkbar. Now checkbar will build a frame. So here, whenever the constructor of a checkbar gets a call, so it's a pix is an array or the list which will be formed over here. So frame also get initialized, and the where's array of where I declare as an array for pick in pix, where equal to integer, and then we are here building the check buttons, and state will hold the state of all the buttons. Means here in this case, in case of checkbar, whenever you create the instance, it forms a list, it forms an array of states and initialize the check buttons. If you go to the main, here root is a window, and then I create the instance of a checkbar by the programming languages. Lang equals to checkbar root, Python, Ruby, Perl and C++. So whenever you create an instance, the constructor of a checkbar will get a call, and then all the list of the languages which you initialize, it comes in the pix, and then for pick in pix, it generates the individual variable for them and create the check buttons, and the state is actually holding the state. It is mapping all the states of all that array over here. Now in the similar manner, I create another instance of a languages to speak, and then again we create an array, and we create an array of states. Now here is the function called as all states to check the states in the sense whether it's a true or false, whether it's checked or unchecked. So we have a function called as all states which print the entire list, whether which languages you selected or which speaking languages you select over here. So there are two buttons by the name of quit, which will quit the window, and the second is pick, by which you'll give a call to the all states and check whether which programming languages and which speaking languages are checked. If you execute this, you'll get the result like this. Now if you select Python from the programming language and German from the language of speaking, and if you click on pick, you'll get, here it is, from the first list you select 1, means like the first Python is selected, Python is the position of 0, and then here on the speaking language 1 0 0 0, rest are false, and here is I pick up a German. Now if you select multiple like Python and C++, and from speaking languages I select both, and if I click on pick, then I'll get here Python position is 1, C++ position is 1, and both are 1 1. And if you unselect all and pick, you'll find all zeros and 1 1, right? And then if you click on quit, you'll terminate the applications. So we are just discussing about how we can build an application with the check buttons. Now guys, check button is actually used for selecting all the components, unselecting all. If you want to build a GUI interface where you can select multiple, we can select all, we can select either. So this is, in this interface radio buttons won't be work. In this interface you can use a checkbox or check buttons. Now in this particular example, it's a OOP interface. What we build a class called as check bar, okay? And then if you form a list of check bar, whenever you create the instance, then pass on this is the window name, and pass on this all the programming languages list. So it will form the programming languages list and its corresponding variables to hold the status of it. In the similar manner, whenever you construct an instance of check bar, it forms a list of all the speaking languages and it holds the status of it. And whenever you click on the button called as pick, it gives a call to the all state functions and list out all the states of programming languages and all the states of the speaking languages. So 1 means selected and 0 stands for unselected. Hope you understand it. Let's go for the third demonstration. Here I created the window with the size of 100, and then there is an empty label which will display the check status, okay? Because up till now we process the event by numeric variable 1 and 0, but here we are going to discuss we are going to display the text, the string which you select over here. So here is the print selection. Where get equals to 1, where get equals to 0 means you select I love Python. If where 1 is get a status is 0, and like where 2 is 1, that is I love C++. And if both are unselected, then I do not anything. And then if both are selected, both having 1 means I love both. So like, let us understand, we have a checkbox where we have a option called as Python, C++, and then if you select the Python, then it will say I love Python. If you select C++ only, then I love C++. You may have option to deselect both, so it will print I do nothing. And then if you select both, it will print I love both. So var1 and var2, because there are two check buttons, so var1 and var2, these are the integer variables which is actually getting assigned the state of that buttons. So here C1 is a check button having text as a Python, right? Variable which is going to hold the status of that button called as var1. And then here to process the event, we have a print selection button is there. Print selection function is there. Whenever you process the event, it gives a call to the print selection. And in the print selections, we have the options which variable is selected. In the similar manner, we create the instance of C2, the check buttons 2, where we have a C++. Again, the variable which is going to hold the status, that is var2, and the command which is processing, that is called as print selection. And we pack these both the check buttons. Let us go for execution. Here it will give me, here the initially label is empty, but if I select C++, okay, so it will process the process the event of check button C++, and var2 is actually holding the status of status of that check button second. And if the var1 that get is 0 and var2 get is 1, it means it will print I love C++. Here it is, I love C++. And if you both select the both, it will say I love both. If you select Python, I love Python. If you deselect both, then I do nothing. I do not anything. That kind of messages are there. Means by using this example, you'll come to know that checkbox or check button have a property that you can select all, you can select individual, you can deselect all. So all possibilities are there with the check button. So print selection is a function which is going to process process the event of the check button, and it is the variables which is actually holding the states of that particular check button. So while constructing check buttons, you need to initialize a variable which holds uh, the state, whether it's a 1 or 2, or even you can go uh, with a string type of data variable, but there you need to initialize the text of that checkbox. So here in this case, check button 1 is actually referring to Python, and variable var1 is actually hold the status of it. And in case of check buttons 2, C++ is a text is appearing, and its event will be processed by the var2, and the command which is going to process the event, that is called as print selections. So var1 and var2 is actually holding the state of that particular check button, and the print selection is going to process the event. So when you click on the check button, it gives a call to the check button, it checks the state whether var1 is true or var2 is true, and as per that the message will be prompted on the label. If var1 is 1, it means checkbox 1 is checked, and if var2 is 1, it means checkbox 2 is checked. If both are selected, then it will print the message I love both, otherwise either will be printed over here. Hope you understand it. So let's go for the next demonstration of checkbox. Now we understand that to construct the check button, right, we need to have a variable to hold the states, we need to have a check button and the command to process. So check button, whenever you perform an event. Now event means select or unselect. So if you select, the var states become 1. If you unselect, var state becomes 0. And to process the event, okay, we have to check if the var1 that get equals to 1 or var1 dot get equals to 0, and on that basis you need to process that check event. Hope you understand it. Now here in this case, now we have a Python based GUI application. Let us firstly execute and understand. Here it is, Python based GUI applications. Now here is the example of a checkbox, disabled checkbox. You can't process the event. Here is a unchecked and checked, and here is it enabled. Okay, so we are going to discuss about the various status of checkboxes over here. Here is like the label with the text checkbox status, and here check 1. Now here check where is a actually integer variable which is going to check the status of disable. Now here check button 1 equals to disable. Now disable means actually it is visible, but you cannot process the event. So there on that check buttons you have to mention the state as disabled. Means if you want to if you want to declare a check button, but you don't want to give the interface to the don't want to give the interface to the user to select that time you can go for that state as a disabled. So check button, root is Windows, and then here text is disabled, variable it is going to process the state of this particular check button, that is ch where it is, and the state is disabled. So it will produce a check buttons with disabled. Then check1.select, and like that disabled check button also having the default state that is selected. Right? So this select is actually going to make it select, and then we have a grid of that check button. So this will produce a check button, disabled check button, and by default it is selected. So now we have another variable check button called as unchecked. Right? So now unchecked means this is going to produce a check button which is unchecked. Right? So this is for that reason we have to go for the deselect. Right? So here means a checkbox check button with deselect means you by default it will remain unchecked and user has to check it also. So the first state that is called as select, so by default it is selected, but if you write the state disabled, so it will be disabled, you cannot able to process any events on it. Now the another checkbox check button that is called as enabled, and here by default it will remain select. So if you have a select state, it means that check button remains selected and you can unselect it. But here if you if you define the state deselect, by default it remains unchecked and you have to check it again. So checked and unchecked, these are the two states. So by default, whether you want to make it disable, whether you want to make it unchecked, or whether you want to make it enable, so that is user has to decide. Right? So it means in this case we are producing the check buttons with the various states. Here the first checkbox check button is a disabled, and the second is unchecked, so user can check it, and third is by default checked, so you can uncheck it. So in this manner you can produce the check buttons. Here by default you cannot able to produce any events on the check 1. In check 2 yes you can, but by default it is unchecked, you can check it and uncheck it. And in the third check button, here it is by default it is selected, you can uncheck it and again check it over. So to process the events, we already discussed about that variable which is holding the integer status. Okay, you define the event processor, and there you check the status. But if it is 1, then it is true, it is checked, and if it is 0, it is unchecked. So in this manner we can use GUI using check buttons. Now these check buttons in case of other languages, okay, we are calling it as a popularly checkboxes, checkbox or check, but like the widget what we are using in Python is called as check button. So just like radio button have a property that you can select any one from the list, but in case of checkbox you can select all, you can deselect all, you can select individual. That is what the property of checkbox. At the same time you can select multiple also. So in today's sessions we discussed how we initialize check button. So the concept is clear. To initialize check button you need a variable. If you want to variable of integer type, so you need to, that particular variable is actually going to check the state of that variable which is of integer type, which actually would hold the state of that particular button, and then to process that event there is an event processor. So while initializing the check buttons in Python, so you have to name it, you have to declare the variable which is going to hold the state of that button, and then you can go with the event processor. So in this manner you can create checkboxes or check buttons, and then you can ask the user to select all, or if you want to develop the interface that like I had explained in the examples that if you want to select the programming languages, the languages, so the answer is you can select all, you can select any individual or more than one, and you can deselect all. So if whenever there is all possibilities of selections, you need to go for check buttons. Hope you enjoy these sessions. Thank you.